وسلموا تسليما محمد وآله. Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam Al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله والورع في ديننا. I call myself and all of you towards God consciousness and piety in the way of the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is a difference between the action that we do and the acceptance of the action that we do. A person may perform the grandest of deeds. That does not necessarily mean that it is going to be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course the opposite is true as well. A person may do the most obscure or maybe even what is perceived to be the most insignificant of deeds. But in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is considered to be the most effective of deed and the most accepted of deeds. The hadith that I want us to be able to reflect on for this afternoon comes to us from Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Imam alayhi salam says the following: Kunu li qabul al-amal ashadda ihtimaman minkum bil-amal. Put more emphasis on the acceptance of an act than the actual act itself. The act is the means to the end and not the end itself. What is the end? The end is the acceptance of that act with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The size of the act, the impact of the act, how long lasting it is, none of this is really in our control. What is most important is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts that act. Our salah here, as an example, will last but a few minutes. Let us just say, as an example, the salah of Jum'ah itself, the 2 rak'ah, will take us 5 minutes. And the Salatul Asr after it will take us 5 minutes. We have spent 10 minutes. But of course, as-salat, umud ad-din, it is the pillar of the religion itself. If it is accepted, everything else is accepted. For 5 minutes I'm standing before my Lord, or for 2 minutes in Salatul Fajr I am standing before my Lord. The act itself is very, very short. But the importance is the acceptance of the act. Because I know that if this is accepted, everything else that I do throughout the day will also be accepted. 2 minutes I'm standing in front of my Lord, but for 2 minutes my mind can be elsewhere. My mind can be on my business, my mind can be on my school, my mind can be on the big game tonight, as it often is. I'm doing more tactics than Antonio Conte is doing tactics in my salah. Can you see? What is most important is the acceptance of that act and not necessarily the act itself. A person can stand all day and all afternoon. It doesn't necessarily mean it has been accepted. Yet another person will come quickly, pray his salah and leave. But with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it has not been just accepted, but maybe even life-altering, those couple of minutes. And clearly we can see here the difference between the act itself and the acceptance of the act. As Imam Ali alayhi salam says, كُونُوا لِقُبُولِ الْعَمَلِ أَشَدَّ اِحْتِمَامًا مِنْكُمْ بِالْعَمَلِ. Place more emphasis, be more steadfast in the acceptance of the act than merely the performance of the act itself. We find this, for example, in the ayat of the Quran. We find this, for example, in the stories that come to us. And as an example, in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 127 of the Holy Quran, we find an act that is the most impactful of acts, possibly throughout the history of mankind. If you were to put it on a scale, there are few acts that possibly outweigh this act. Look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 127. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَإِذْ يَرْفَعُ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْقَوَاعِدَ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ وَإِسْمَاعِيلُ. And remember, bring to mind, when Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam raised the foundations of the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the history of our deen, few acts have been more impactful, more long-lasting, more important than actually raising the foundations of the Kaaba. How many hajjaj, how many prayers, how many lives have turned at that one location? Can you think of something as a greater deed? And you would imagine that just by Allah giving you that honor to be the one that would raise His house for all humanity, you would imagine that the fact that Allah gave you the tawfiq, the opportunity, the blessing to be able to do this, Allah has already accepted your act. No. Look how the ayah continues. وَإِذْ يَرْفَعُ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْقَوَاعِدَ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ وَإِسْمَعِيلُ. What do they say? رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا. Oh Allah, accept this act from us. إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. Even raising the foundations of the Kaaba, Ibrahim and Ismail salamullahi alayhima asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept that particular act. The act itself wasn't important in their eyes. Allah's acceptance of the act was important in their eyes. And this is something that we can take on throughout our own lives, that whatever small we do, whatever big action we do, Allah does not judge it in the same context that you and I judge it in. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala judges it by its value with Him. And the value with Him is rooted in the acceptance of that particular act. This is why the hadith that we mentioned this afternoon from Imam Ali alayhi salam, كُونُوا لِقُبُولِ الْعَمَلِ أَشَدَّ اِحْتِمَامًا مِنْكُمْ بِالْعَمَلِ. Place more importance on the acceptance of the act over the act itself, as Imam alayhi salam says. There's a story. It has been attributed actually to maybe one or two different people in history. But nevertheless, when our teacher mentioned this story to me, it was specifically attributed to Allama al-Majlisi, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh. You know Allama al-Majlisi, one of the greatest authors, compilers in the history of Islam. Just as an example, Bihar al-Anwar, more than 120 volumes of ahadith, Mir'at al-Uqul, dozens of volumes of works throughout his lifetime. You can imagine how much effort this individual has put in to compiling the ahadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, trying to verify the ahadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. His contribution lasts with us until today and forevermore. The narration or the anecdote says that he had a friend and they made a pact with each other that said that whichever one of us dies first, we will come into the dream of the other to tell them what akhirah is like. So if I die before you, I come into your dream and I tell you this is what happened at death, this is what happened in akhirah, this is what happened with the malaika and their interrogations of me. It so happened that Allama Majlisi died first. And so he came into the dream of his friend, but after a long time, maybe, after a month or so of our time, of the dunyai realm, he comes into the dream of his companion after a month. In the dream, his companion says to him, Allama, it's been a month. You were supposed to come to me as soon as you were for free, as soon as the interrogation by the angels had finished. Right? Who is your Lord? What is your book? These are real quick questions. And the answer is quite simple. Rabbi, my Lord is my Lord. My book is the Quran, khalas. Allama says, no, you don't understand. My interrogation lasted this long. Only now did I become free. So he asks, well, what happened? What were the malaika saying to you all this time? So he said, after I, dispensed with all of these questions, the malaika said, last question, give me one amal that you have done in your life that is worthy of going into Jannah now. The malaika are the gatekeepers. They've got the criteria from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allama begins to list off the grand achievements that he has done. I've written Bihar al-Anwar, more than 100 volumes of narrations of Ahl al-Bayt alayhimus salam. Malaika not accepted. What do you mean? Nope, this is not good enough to get you through. What else have you got? I've got Mir'alat al-Qul, I've got this, I've got that. Sorry, not accepted. Give us something else. Sort of in my language, Allama is racking his brains. What could he have to offer bigger than this? After some time, he remembers an incident in the darkness of the night. He says, one night, I was writing the narrations of Ahl al-Bayt alayhimus salam, and there was a fly that was buzzing around. Normally the fly bugs you, doesn't it? You want to shoo it away. He says, the fly was buzzing around, and it landed on my ink pot. And I thought to myself, don't shoo the fly away. Maybe it is tired. Maybe it is resting. Maybe it needs something to drink and can just take something from this liquid that is in the ink pot. And then my thought drifted away from the fly and back to my work. And eventually the fly moved on as it does, and it flew here and there. According to this anecdote, the malaika said, that's the deed that's getting you into Jannah now. That one moment of sincerity and mercy to this creation, to a fly, was weightier with Allah Jalla Jalaluhu than all of the kutub that you had written. We don't understand what has really caught the attention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What has been accepted with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All the things we think we have done in this world, it could be that the smallest grain actually is weightier with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In each of these occasions, accept our amal, and we have to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He finds it pleasing to Him. As we are studying this afternoon the hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam, كونوا لقبول العمل أشد اهتماما منكم بالعمل. Make it that the effort towards the acceptance of your amal is more important than simply the amal itself. And this is something that you and I can take on in our life throughout today. Try it. Just when you do something, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, accept it from me. تقبل minna. Anything. You could hold the door open for someone. You could give someone a glass of water. You could say a nice word. You could smile. But when it is linked with Allah's acceptance, overtly, this is when these acts really start to take seed, begin to blossom. We know Allah, He is pleased with it, and these are the things that we hope will remain with us when we pass from this world. Our humble advice for this afternoon, and to myself and to you, is to think about these ayat and these ahadith in this way, and try to be able to really make sure that Allah accepts our a'mal, however small or however large we imagine it to be. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amilu as-salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين أما بعد. Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam Al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Usikum wa nafsi bittaqwallah wal wara'a fi dinina. I call myself and all of you towards God consciousness and piety in the way of the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The action is less important than the acceptance of the action. And we should pursue the acceptance of the action even above the action itself. There are some people who imagine that just by them getting into government, that somehow they're you were waiting for the link, weren't you? I could see it. I could see it in your eyes. There are some people who imagine that they will do anything to get into power, anything to get into position, so long as they are there. Allah Jalla Jalaluhu may not accept even a good deed that they do because of how they did it. And worse still, all of the crime that they will commit, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will look very harshly upon them for the things that they have done. So, we have a new cabinet. And how was this cabinet put together? You may have read or seen in the news and the discussions that many of those who really should now have been political outcasts are now back as ministers. You got one who was caught cheating on his wife during the pandemic on camera. He's back as deputy prime minister. You got another one who broke the ministerial code, who literally the security agencies say that she has too much of a loose tongue. She doesn't keep the national security secrets. She was forced to resign a week ago for national security breaches, breaking the ministerial code, and all of a sudden she's back in being the Home Office. This whole notion that there can be a reset in this government just by changing the face of the person, moving from a white person to a woman, moving from a woman to a brown person, none of it matters. You can see that really it is a different face, but it is the same soul of the party. Now what's really interesting is that you probably saw that they had placed a threshold of requirement of 100 votes by MPs for you to have a potential in the leadership campaign. And as you know, only a few days ago, Boris Johnson reached somewhere around 60 MPs nominating him. So that shows you that he's still beloved by the party. After everything that's happened, look at the mentality of these people. He would have needed just 40 more for it to have been him included in a potential ballot, or him to go head-to-head, for example, with Rishi Sunak. And let's be honest, the last time Rishi ran against a white person, it didn't go very well for him. So if he had ran against Boris Johnson, I wonder whether we would be in a different position today. Do you know what stopped Boris from getting back in? Suella Braverman, who is back again as Home Secretary, she carries a part of the party with her, a wing of the party, which is the farthest right of the party. And the deal was made. Basically, the deal was, on behalf of Richie, that if you come back in to be my Home Secretary, and I'll give you a bit of a free rein to be able to demonize whoever you want to demonize, deport whomsoever you want to deport, create problems for protesters however you want. I give you that freedom, but in return, those MPs that are with you in your group, your bloc in the Tory party, has to vote for me and not go towards Boris. That was the trade-off. And that's what she did. She made sure that those 40 MPs swung this way and not that way, and made sure that Rishi got back into power, or got into power, and not Boris got back into power. These are the political machinations that are occurring behind closed doors over this past week. And obviously there is a very nice image. The real question is, how long can this ungodly alliance last? The Tory party has 3 wings to it: the crazy, the crazier, and the craziest. The question is, how long will the crazies be kept out? And this is something that they will have to do. And the problem that they have is that they have people in power now again who are not there to help people. They are there to help themselves. And they have such prejudices and hatreds. The question is, when is the next time Suella Braverman will say something, like she did last time? When is the next time one of these people will say something that, brings the play down, brings the curtain down for us to be able to see what lies behind? Can he last 6 months? Can he last 12 months to steady the ship? These are questions that will unfold in front of our eyes over the next 6 to 12 months. I want to mention very interesting hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh. After the killing of the third caliph Uthman bin Affan, many of the famous companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam refused to pledge allegiance to Imam Ali alayhi salam. Individuals either refused or they sort of took a political quietness. And it's a much lengthy discussion that one day I hope to have with you. Why Hassan bin Thabit said this, why Abdullah ibn Umar said that, the stances that they took and the consequences of those political stances in at that time in the history as well. But I want to mention when Imam Ali alayhi salam responds to some of those who refused to give Imam Ali alayhi salam allegiance. Some of them refused because they were enjoying positions from Uthman bin Affan. You see, yesterday they were governors. Yesterday they were heads of cities. And so they had a lot of access to power, position, wealth. And if Imam Ali alayhi salam immediately dismisses you, are you going to give allegiance to him? No. Others felt that there was sort of a fitna brewing, and they didn't want to choose between Aisha and Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. So they said, we're just going to sit back until the people decide, or until a war occurs and one army wins over the other, then we will stick with the winners. And this is mentioned specifically, some of the companions said these things explicitly. But I want to show you how Imam Ali alayhi salam thought about this and how he dealt with this in certain statements. And you can see sort of how one wing of the party goes this way, one wing of the party goes that way, the decisions that they make, and how Imam Ali alayhi salam may have analyzed these sorts of machinations with the narrations that he gives to us. So the hadith is as follows. Imam Ali alayhi salam gives a speech when Abdullah ibn Umar, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, Muhammad bin Maslima, Hassan bin Thabit, and Osama refused to give allegiance to Imam Ali alayhi salam. He said the following: Ayyuhan nas, O people, innakum baya'tumuni ala ma buya'a alayhi man kana qabli. O people, you have sworn allegiance to me on the same reasoning as to what you swore allegiance to those before me. Think about this very carefully. If the people swore allegiance upon the first caliph, the second caliph, the third caliph, for whatever reason they swore allegiance, should it be the same reason as to why they swear allegiance to Imam Ali alayhi salam? Is Imam Ali alayhi salam's position equal to that of the first caliph, the second caliph, the third caliph? No. It is obvious. Imam Ali alayhi salam was given the khilafat in wilayat by Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. Others were given it by a coup. Others were given it by vote. Others. Imam says, you have given me allegiance on the same reasonings that you have given someone else? Is that why you're here? Am I in the same position as others? Indeed, people have options before they swear allegiance to someone. Even in this same case, people make their decisions. Why I go into power? They have options. They can choose what route they take to get into position, to stay out of position. Imam says you have options before you decide which direction you go into. He says this is a public allegiance. Whoever turns away from it is turning away from the religion of Islam and is following a path other than that of a Muslim. Your allegiance to me was not by accident. You thought about why you're doing what you're doing. Your allegiance to me was not without thinking, and your motives are not the same as mine. I want you for God. You want me for your own interests. Imam says. What a statement. Inni uridukum lillah. I want you as the people of the ummah for the sake of Allah. I want to implement Allah. وَأَنْتُمْ تُرِيدُونَنِي لِأَنفُسِكُمْ. But you want me in power for your own interests. When these people take office and they decide, I'm going with Richie, or I'm going with Boris, or I'm going with this person or that person, and their choices, you have to realize, are they doing it for Allah? Are they doing it for the nation? Are they doing it for you? Are they doing it to implement policy? Or are they only seeking to get into position for their own interests? Imam highlights this in his own time, at the very, very beginning of his khilafat. Some people gave me allegiance out of their own interests, hoping that they would get somewhere, hoping that their enmity to Uthman could be rewarded, their enmity to Aisha could be rewarded, and so on and so forth. In the hadith that we have studied this afternoon, Imam tells us, really think about your action. Aim for the reward of Allah, the acceptance of Allah, and not just the act itself. This is something that you and I can think about throughout our own times and in every position that we are in community, in family, in education. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasten the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the opportunity to serve him throughout our life and in our death. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our a'mal, whatever they may be, small or big. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instill in us the regular act of asking Allah to accept the things that we do in His way. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحليم الكريم غافر الذنب وقابل التوب وهو الغفور الرحيم. سبحان من سبقت رحمته غضبه وبسط اليدين بالرحمة. سبحان من لم يكلف نفسا دون وسعها وعفى عن السيئات ولم يجاز بها. سبحان من لا يزداد على معاصي العباد إلا كرما وجودا وعلى كثرة الذنوب إلا عفوا وصفحا. نشهد أن لا إله إلا هو العطوف على العباد بجوده والعواد على المذنبين بحلمه. ونشهد أن محمدا نبيه وحبيبه سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين بعثه رحمة للعالمين. اللهم صل على سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وعلى إمام المسلمين وقائد الغر المحجلين أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب صلوات الله عليه وآله وعلى سيدة نساء العالمين وبدعة خاتم النبيين سيدتنا فاطمة بنت رسول الله صلوات الله عليها وعلى الحسن المجتبى والحسين الشهيد بكربلاء، وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي عليهم الصلاة والسلام. اللهم صل على مولانا صاحب الزمان ماحي آثار البدع والطغيان، هادم بنية الشرك والنفاق، حاسد فروع البغي والشقاق، صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آبائه الكرام ما اتصل الليالي والأيام. اللهم عجل فرجه وسهل مخرجه، واكحل ناظرنا بنظرة منا إليه، واجعلنا من المستشهدين بين يديه. اللهم اجعلنا ممن يذكر فتنفعه الذكرى. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. يا رب. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر. الله